Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Hollywood Undead called Five. So if it isn't unbelievably obvious, I did not want to review this. More importantly, I have no idea why anybody wanted me to cover this. I'd like to think that my patrons watch my reviews and aren't just adding records to fill up space on the schedule, and yet the fact that this consistently got so many votes utterly baffles me. But I don't want to mince words with this here. Hollywood Undead sucks. As someone who likes good metal and good hip-hop and can tolerate some crossover between the two, and even appreciates a good horrorcore gimmick, this is the sort of group I would have avoided like the plague, because as I keep on saying, I never had an angry white boy phase. And after I listened through all of their last couple of albums, that's really the only demographic I can see somewhat appreciating this, even ironically. The best way to describe their first record is trying to split the difference between Eminem and Linkin Park, but the rapping was nowhere close to being as good. The clean singing was a very poor imitation of the late Chester Bennington at best, and the production has aged particularly badly. They got a little bit heavier on their second album, but the clean singing and rapping somehow got even worse. I found their blend of meat-headed flexing and flimsy shock tactics almost reaching the point of parody. Now, to someone who listens to far nastier hip-hop and metal, this does not shock me. But unlike Marilyn Manson or Eminem, there was no depth or skill or potent fire to outlast the shock tactics. And the ballads might be some of the most embarrassing music I've heard all year. How anyone can justify a song like Bullet, I have no idea. And yet from there, look, no matter how many bargain barrel Skrillex ripoff effects you add to subsequent records, it doesn't make the writing any less walking cringe. The best thing that I can say is that if you completely tune out anything these guys are saying, the production can go in somewhat of an interesting direction with a decent hook or groove, but that is not saying much. I went through 4 albums of this. I would not recommend any of them. So forgive me when I feel that I say that I've got no expectations for this new album, which is reportedly taking things in a completely new direction. Yeah, I'll believe it when I hear it. So okay, what happened on 5? Well, okay, it shouldn't shock any of you that this is pretty bad, but at least 5 records in, I think I'm starting to get a clear picture of Hollywood Undead's appeal, for lack of better terms. But in coming to understand that appeal and any nebulous strengths this group might have, their weaknesses are all the more stark. A profoundly confused and unfocused group that tries to balance increasingly flimsy but kind of earnest angst with aggro macho posturing that just does not have the muscle or edge to be remotely convincing for me. Thematically, it's kind of analogous to nu metal and what the best bands in that genre tried to do, but without real heft or instead relying on bad hip-hop cliches. You wind up with music that's trying to balance out a half dozen different ideas and tones and failing at nearly all of them. And really, it should be enough just to stop right there, but you know what? Let's take this seriously. Let's start with our MCs and singers. And look, let me start by saying I can appreciate energy, or attempts to structure a halfway decent hook. Danny working on his Chester Bennington impression really does provide more of a foundation to these songs that he probably gets credit. On songs like Nobody's Watching, he proves that he's got some vocal chops when he's not being buried beneath effects and autotune. Why they would do that is utterly beyond me. And you know what? I'll even accept that Johnny Three Tears' Eminem circa 1999 impression can ride a beat halfway decently, and that Charlie Scene can show off some dramatic range and switching from bars to actual singing or shouting. But there's no way around it. The flows in this record are embarrassingly basic, stringing together obvious rhymes and rarely going for any metaphors or ideas that haven't been beaten to death by dozens of acts right ahead of them. Hell, scratch that we haven't already seen on other Hollywood Undead records. I'm definitely not crazy about Be Real of Cypress Hill showing up on Black Cadillac. Dude, do you even know what record you're even on? None of this is for the kids. But there's more going on in his lyrical construction than what we get on so many of the songs here. And when your MCs don't have a distinct lyrical personality 5 albums in between them, you've done your group a serious disservice by neglecting that character development. And that's where we get to whenever these guys try to embrace a singing voice that's closer to a baritone that none of them can make sound remotely intimidating, which tilts the tracks into something damn close to self-parody. Seriously, as much as I might dig the flow behind whatever it takes, when Charlie Scene talks about pulling out his 9 so you can wave bye-bye, I'm sorry, sorry. It's too damn silly. I can't take this seriously. And now we've moved on to the part of the review where I will make fun of the stupid as hell lyrics. I'm sorry if you're fans, this has to happen. And here's the first pointer. Maybe if you're trying to sound tough, you don't want to talk about your haters getting shook, or that loneliness is the only bitch that holds me, or how exes meet my hoes, it's like tic-tac-toe. That comes right after that stupid Gucci Bottoms repeated rhyme, or how despite Johnny 3 Tears raging that he can't go back to look what he wrote in that diary on Broken Record, he's then gonna show the diary off to everyone anyway on Pray Put Him in the Dirt. And that showcases one of the fundamental problems here, a total lack of lyrical consistency across this album, because from song to song, this wants to be a record of party bangers and flexing, the most underwritten and forgettable blend of angst, some stabs at horror imagery that comes somewhat close to kind of working with the werewolf content on Bad Moon with that final verse, and yet fails utterly on Pray Put Him in the Dirt, a half-hearted tribute to California on songs like Ghost Beach, that Danny complains how it's changed despite Hollywood Undead really representing so much of the shallow hedonism that they will then rail against, and, most hilariously, an attempt to speak to their fans, to quell their raging angst on songs like Nobody's Watching and Your Life, to reinforce that they're all young renegades, and that, you know, they shouldn't die. And you know what that got me thinking? If you're looking to speak to a fundamentally white male adolescent worldview, the mess of contradictions that is Hollywood Undead could make some sense on an emotional level at least. The problem is that once you're satiated by it, or you just grow up a little bit, you realize that the writing and the detail is so painfully thin and shows no real internal logic as a whole record. I might not really like that last Marilyn Manson record, but there's more lyrical imagination than this. It just goes for cheap sloganeering and nothing that feels remotely intimidating or potent, or even really details that feel imaginative on these songs. And a huge part that contributes to this is the production, which might be one of the most slapdash fusions of modern trap production with grinding metal that I've heard in some time. If you're expecting those chunky riffs that are really devoid of melody to carry a thicker low end, you're gonna be pretty disappointed. And that's before you pile on all those tinkling keys, the blaring pseudo-Skrillex synthesizers that feel about 6 years out of date, the gated drum machines, the gang vocals, and the auto-tune. And it's not surprising that by trying to fuse all the sounds together, it ends up just kind of feeling watered down overall. What threw me off was how utterly one-dimensional the mood can feel from track to track, particularly on the back half of this record. Yeah, the pivots to obvious major key pop choruses on Broken Record and Nobody's Watching, they were goofy as hell, but you know what? They felt a lot more memorable than so many of the unconvincing threats of violence against whirring synth tones, the trap hi-hats, and a painfully neglected melodic guitar line. I mean, nobody buys that these guys are all for real with how violent they say they are. And while I could point to some hysterical moments like Johnny 3 Tears saying that the bells would herald my demise on Black Cadillac when there are no bells in the mix, or the cheap auto-tune drizzled all over the ridiculous bridge on Riot, or how Your Life treads dangerously close to parody with the shouting over the end of the verse, or how those distracting synth additions on Renegade or the fake horns and the pitch shifting on Cashed Out, the larger problem with all of this is that there's no greater sense of atmosphere or a menace that's allowed to build on these songs, and there's absolutely no subtlety. There's very little modulation in delivery or intensity between the hedonism and the aggression, passive or otherwise, and without the patience to cultivate a lot of that, none of this can really get under my skin or feel all that intimidating. Now that said, if I were to point at two songs that are fine enough for just some mindless headbanging, it would be Whatever It Takes and Bang Bang. Again, Marilyn Manson was far more convincing on similar industrial-leaning grooves, but these are okay efforts, especially in the latter sounding like an off-brand Doomtree instrumental, even if the lyrics remain pretty damn embarrassing. But in the end, look, you don't have to tell me that I am not the target audience for this. I already said that I never had an angry white boy phase as a teenager, and that's really the only demographic I can see remotely enjoying this unironically. But even if you are part of that group, there is rock and metal and hip-hop with so much more intensity and edge than this. Say nothing of cohesive lyrics or some storytelling or some actual narrative complexity. To me, this is painfully basic and ultimately just kind of tedious when it's not hilariously bad. As much as does Hollywood Undead want to give the finger to online critics like me? I'm not so much intimidated as I am just faintly amused that anybody takes this seriously. As such, 3 out of 10, I can't recommend this, or really anything that Hollywood Undead has ever released, but that should be no surprise coming from me. Do yourself a favor and skip this. Go listen to, I don't know, Idols' album Brutalism, the debut that came out this year. That was great. Or Knives' Boy Thursday, or even that last Yellow Wolf record, Trial by Fire. It had a few solid rap rock joints with some detail and texture and intensity that I would definitely recommend. Trust me, in 5 years, or even 5 months, you'll be glad you did that, because this, it won't stick around. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. I know, I'm not the target audience for this. If you want to leave all your hate, comments are below. You want to buy the record, support the band, links in the description. And I got the poll up there for you all tell me how wrong I am, although, really, come back to this review in 2 years, I'm not that wrong when it comes to this album, because this is not good at all. Beyond that, if you guys want to support this channel and potentially impact my schedule so I don't have to review crap like this, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once per week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Big Crit is coming up next. Believe me, I've been looking forward to talking about it. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.